This article originally appeared on Triathlete Never. Has a running style in triathlon been critiqued as much as the one possessed by Lionel Sanders? How he covers the ground so fast when appearing to shuffle with a hitch in his stride is the physics-defying spectacle that leaves the skeptics agog, even more so as the Canadian invariably leaves his challengers for dust. But it's not just the unusual style. It's also that when it comes to the death throes of a race and a dramatic sprint finish, Lionel takes it out. Perhaps it's no coincidence, given the racing dustups he so relishes, but Sanders also seems to be involved in more of these sprint finishes than just about any triathlete on the planet. And after his latest head-to-head blowout with Sam Long at this year's Collins Cup, Triathlete decided it's high time to do a bit of analysis on his sprinting ability, to decipher why Sanders is the clutch performer when it comes to the crux. We tapped Jorge Martinez, who specializes in metabolic testing and biomechanics at the FreeSpeed Lab, to look at some of the most dramatic finishes, with some added color from Lionel's candid post-race appraisals on his YouTube. Hey, race, what we've learned about the fine art of the sprint finish. Related, Lionel Sanders Fuels with maple syrup. Lionel Sanders v. Pablo Dapena Gonzalez Challenge Daytona, December 2019. Being under the lights on the Daytona Speedway in Florida only added to the atmosphere as Sanders' Spanish rival continually surged in an effort to break the Canadian's will. Sanders was honest enough to admit that Dapena hadn't been on his radar until the build-up to this clash, but just a week after an Ironman 73 win in Indian Wells, he had enough in the tank to claim victory. Pablo threw like 8 surges where I was truly sprinting, putting gaps into me, and I kept working and working. With maybe 1.5 miles to go, he put in a surge, and I said, I've got one shot, go with the surge and just keep the pace up. I got a little gap and I said, you gotta go. I felt my right hamstring with every step, so I was saying, don't cramp. It might be the best race I've ever done. The best battle I've ever had. From the times I've analyzed Sanders' run performances, it appears his energy cost of running, ECOR, doesn't get affected as much as other athletes when they fatigue. The ECOR is how much speed we get in return for the power we generate. If you can run at a faster speed with less running power, it means your running is more efficient. I don't have direct data, i.e., power files, but the estimates I've calculated from Sanders' racing data and video footage are consistent. Pablo's energy cost of running may have been better than Sanders initially, but as he fatigued with repeated surges, eventually it may have cost him slightly more energy, allowing Sanders to take victory. Lionel Sanders v. Sam Long Ironman 73 St. George, May 2021. The longest of sprints in Utah captured the imagination of tri fans the world over. Sanders and Long were in lockstep for the final 5 kilometers and arrived at the line at such pace the runoff area hardly had enough space to contain Long's momentum. It was a classic piece of endurance sport theater, as both refused to yield before Sanders finally opened a gap with the line in sight. I just started sprinting with about half a kilometer to go. It's hard to look directly behind you, so I had no idea how big the gap was, but it felt like it was about 10 meters. So, I sprinted into the final roundabout, looked back, and he's still in striking distance. I didn't want to let him think there was any possibility he might catch me. I came to the finish line, and just the emotion of a great battle came out. Normally I'm chockful of anger and pure adrenaline. This time it was like a different emotion. The first time I had a couple of tears in my eyes at the finish line. Long would gain time on Sanders on the descents, but Sanders would pull it back on the inclines and flats. Long, on the other hand, is more of an aerial runner with a longer flight time, longer stride, 164 centimeters, slower cadence, 182 SPM, higher ground contact time, 205 milliseconds, and vertical oscillation, 7 centimeters. He also can generate a good amount of propulsion, but in a slightly different way, his tendons and connective tissue helping to get more energy return per stride. In the last 5 kilometers, Long was able to catch Sanders during the descent, but as soon as they had around 1 kilometer to go and the road flattened out, Sanders was able to increase his cadence, increasing his propulsion enough to build the final gap. Related, how to run smarter in hilly races. Lionel Sanders v. Rudy Von Berg Ironman 73 Oceanside, April 2022. Photo, Donald Morale/Ironman, the closest finish of the lot. South close, in fact. that the organizers weren't set up for it and needed unofficial camera film footage to separate the two. Sanders had been forced to bike conservatively after an issue with his nutrition and started the run adrift. His 68-minute half marathon, the fastest of the race, wouldn't be enough to catch compatriot Jackson Laundrie, but took him past Ben Canuta and Alistair Brownlee and up to Von Berg for the final sprint for second. Lionel's view: I caught Brownlee with 600 meters to go. He didn't respond, he didn't care. Then Rudy was right there. I surged again to catch, but I'd been working since mile 11 and a half and were 200 meters from the finish. I was going to take an opportunity to chill for a moment before the final sprint, but I must have startled him because the moment I caught him he started sprinting, so there was no reprieve. Every muscle fiber in my body was engaged back and forth, and I had a tiny bit more. I knew it was controversial who won, but in the moment it was clear as day that I outlaned him. It's a weird situation when you get in a fun battle like that, but it's not for the win. But the positions weren't what motivated me, I just loved the battle. This results in each step gaining a bit more propulsion, and coupled with his no-limits motivation to beat whoever is in front of him gave him the edge. Lionel Sanders v. Braden Curry Ironman World Championship, St. George, May 2022. Sanders managed to take down longtime leader Curry in the final yards to claim a second runner-up spot in the Ironman World Championship 5 years after first making the podium in Hawaii. With the second fastest marathon of the day, 2:42, on a rolling course, patience paid off as Sanders pulled back 5 minutes on the run and caught the plucky Kiwi just before the line. I'm at mile 24, the gap is 60 seconds, and I took it 1 gear more. I made a left turn to the out and back section before the finish, and now tactics were coming in too. I knew at the final turnaround I needed to have the element of surprise, and pulled back as much time as I could because he'd get a second wind if he saw it was a good gap. I worked hard into the corner and had it down to 100 meters, it was hit and miss. At about 400 meters to go, I was coming right up on him. I made the mistake in Oceanside of coming up next to Rudy, see above, and taking a break, so this time I made sure to surprise. I took a few breaths and then I made the move, and I think that element of surprise was enough to create a big enough gap. I made the final left turn, and the crowd were going crazy. It was completely overwhelming. Sanders approached the World Championship differently to other races and was more disciplined on the bike and early part of the run, sticking to his pacing and fueling strategies. In my opinion, it allowed him to sustain a consistent pace throughout the entire marathon. More so, it allowed him to speed up in the final miles while Curry was slowing, outpacing him by up to 30 seconds per mile. Add to this his incredible ability to block the pain as he lets adrenaline fuel him through the finishing miles. Related video: Lionel Sanders on his epic sprint and insane day. Lionel Sanders v. Sam Long, again, Collins Cup, Slovakia, August 2022. Photo: Darren Wheeler / Professional Triathletes Organization. Still fresh in the memory, there was a sense this battle was won for both men before the sprint ensued in the X-Bionic Sphere in Samorin. Objective number 1 seemed to be to bury Sam Laidlow and avenge Long's beef with his European rival. Once soundly achieved, it shaped up to be a repeat of the St. George 73 duel for the duo. Lionel pulled ahead while entering the finish arena. Long, in his final race of a European summer tour, looked satisfied to settle for second. I was waiting for him, keeping an eye to see if he was going to go first. With 200 meters to go, I decided it's now or never, so I went full tilt and the gap opened up. I grabbed the Internationals flag, tried to soak in the crowd a tiny bit, and screamed in carnal joy when I crossed the finish line. When Sanders beat Long at St. George 73 last year, he was able to open a gap at the last water stop and increased his cadence from 195 steps per minute (SPM) to 205 SPM, while Long stayed around 180 SPM. At the Collins Cup, Sanders draws on this experience. As favored for the match, when the pressure was on, he found the extra gear and was able to dig that bit deeper. Related, recalled 3 crazy sprint finishes.